Hi, everyone. So thank you all for joining. I'm sure you're here because you've either been affected by ransomware or maybe your boss has just told you that you need to learn about it. So there's been plenty of it hitting customers and non-customers for the last year. So the big question of to pay or not to pay and how to protect yourself, how ransomware works and what you can do about it will all be covered in this. So a little bit about myself. I've been at Sophos for 5 years, or just over, and I deal with malware cases on a daily basis. I'm part of support, so I come from a technical background. So when we get to the end of this, hopefully I'll be able to answer many of your questions. So let's get on with this. So we're going to cover just a bit of background. So where does ransomware come from? How did we get to this point? The question of to pay or not to pay. And then how a ransomware attack actually works, what you would see in your environment. Then we're going to look at different types of ransomware. There are differences. Many of them do roughly the same thing, but there's some little quirks to them that are interesting. Why these attacks are so successful, where are they going to take us next, what you can do to prevent these kind of things, separate to Sophos, what you can do right now, and then how Sophos can help further as well. And then, of course, the questions. So let's move to a bit of background. So ransomware, it has its roots in misleading apps and fake antivirus. I'm sure most people remember fake antivirus, the stuff that pops up on your screen saying you've got hundreds of different infections. Luckily, they're here to help for a small fee. You pay that fee and they generally infected you with more malware. So those kind of died off because people realized that they were fake. And we moved into lockers. So the lockers were the things that they would sort of freeze your screen. You wouldn't be able to minimize it. And you maybe have to pay some money or phone a number, and then someone would helpfully remote into your machine and get rid of it all for you. Of course, again, all lies. Now, lockers aren't seen as much anymore, but they're still common on mobile devices. So, you go to a website on a mobile device and it will lock your Android or iOS phone and you won't be able to get around it. I mean, there are ways of getting around it, but to the average user, they still fall for the con and pay the money, unfortunately. And then we moved into the far more sort of evil ransomware known as crypto ransomware. This is the stuff that you've probably experienced or know about, where it encrypts your data, so your photos and your videos and this PowerPoint document. It's all your work can be encrypted and you can't get it back unless you pay that fee. So, and as you can see from this chart, this is 2015 crypto ransomware, more than 50%. It's just gaining its percentage at the moment. So it unfortunately doesn't look like it's going. Very, very simple timeline here. This is just showing some of the most sort of well-known ones. Now, most people refer to CryptoLocker and crypto ransomware. The CryptoLocker is sort of the generic name that everyone uses, but actually sort of started back before that with Dirty Decrypt. That one, very sort of version 1 kind of thing. It only encrypted 8 different file types. The encryption wasn't anything special. So quickly moved into CryptoLocker, which used 2048-bit RSA encryption, and it moved away from what the lockers and fake antivirus were doing in regards to payment, which they use sort of prepaid vouchers and things like that, where we moved to using Tor and Bitcoin, far more anonymous, far better for the criminals. And then later, when we started seeing malware becoming more and more of a business and the term malware as a service sort of arrived, that's when you don't really have to have the super geeky knowledge of how to write malware. You can just pay a monthly fee and they'll give you all the tools. And CTB-Locker was sort of one of these. They offer an affiliate or partner model. So you get access to their ransomware and you just distribute it to all your victims in whatever method you can, and then you get most of the money back, but some percentage goes to the creators of the actual CTB-Locker itself. So, it's far more business-orientated, impacted a lot of people, and it just shows how organized and how blatant this has all become nowadays. And then you've got several other ones. Crypto Wall is well known, Torrent Locker, TeslaCrypt, Locky. So TeslaCrypt was huge for all of last year, basically. big in the beginning of this year. Then we saw in February, Locky, which you may have heard of. It's known as Locky because all the encrypted files had .locky as their extension when they were encrypted. It was spread via a spam email, one of the largest spam campaigns ever seen, all on the same time. It was a Wednesday, I forget the date, but yeah, so hundreds, thousands of people hit by Locky and had all their files encrypted. Now, this timeline, I mean, bearing in mind I only finished putting these slides together this week, this is already out of date. There's several other new ransomwares that we'll be talking about that have come after these ones. In fact, TeslaCrypt has actually shut down now. About a month ago now, TeslaCrypt announced they were shutting down. They published the master encryption keys and a message saying, "We're sorry." Now, they didn't give any of the money back, so I don't think they're that sorry, but they did provide the master decryption keys. So there's plenty of free tools out there now, so if you have been recently hit by TeslaCrypt, I'd suggest you go and Google those because, yeah, you can probably get your files back, which is great, but unfortunately, TeslaCrypt was very quickly replaced by other ones. CryptX, or CryptXXX technically, is the one that's replaced it, and unfortunately that's even more dangerous, and we'll come on to that later. So the attack vectors, how does this stuff actually get onto your machines? Two main ways. There are other ways, but the two prominent ways are spam, and these are probably the ones you've seen. These are the ones that have the attachments, normally a Word or Excel file or a bit of JavaScript, maybe in a zip, most commonly in a zip. And the way they work, they've gone are the days of badly worded emails that you can easily spot typos and, you know, it's clearly not written by an English speaker. Those are all gone. These are well-written emails from plausible senders. They'll spoof domains and they'll look plausible. They may come from a delivery company or whoever. They'll have attachments called like invoice or CV and things like that. So the idea is there won't be much in the email because the fewer words they put in the email, the fewer things we can catch them on. But the idea is trick the user into opening the attachment and getting them to, well, in the case of Word and Excel, it's getting them to run macros. If it's a JavaScript file, it's just running the JavaScript. So these are used by Locky, Torrent Locker, CTB Locker, many others. And it is a very, very common method for getting malware out. Doesn't have to be ransomware, but predominantly it is, because it's unfortunately the most profitable for them. Then exploit kits. Now these are the ones that are a little bit harder to realize you've been hit by because they're not as obvious. It's not as, you know, all your users don't suddenly get an email. This is people going to a website where it's been compromised and they end up getting this ransomware. On the next slide we'll talk about that a bit more. Sorry, not next slide actually. But these are tools that you can pay for them on a monthly basis, available on the black market, the dark web, and they come with technical support. You know, it's a very much a business-orientated thing, and they take advantage of the companies that don't patch as often as they should be, basically. Wrong button. Okay, so to pay or not to pay. Now, even our own advice has changed on this over the years. Most security companies will say, do not pay, never pay, they're criminals, never give them money. And in an ideal world, that is what I would say as well. Unfortunately, in the real world, I mean, I can't honestly say if I lost all the pictures of my children and didn't have backups, I can't honestly say I wouldn't pay myself. So we're not going to try and take the moral high ground. We're going to say it's okay to pay, but it's much better not to. Now, things to keep in mind. Don't pay if you can possibly avoid it. You know, even if it's a little bit of work, you know, if you've got to go and restore those backups or, you know, if it's a little bit of work to get those files back, do it. Because ultimately, if you pay, you're giving money to criminals. And ultimately, if nobody paid, we wouldn't have to be dealing with this at all. It's that simple. Now, of course, the better position to be in is if you actually take precautions today and don't get into this position in the first place. You know, if you've got those backups or if you've got all the various different layers of protection that stops these attacks, then of course you don't even have to answer this question. And also remember that if you do pay, there's nothing stopping them necessarily attacking you again the next day. You know, so there's no guarantee. We saw there was a hospital in America recently who paid, and they only decrypted half their files. and then they had to pay again, which they refused to do so at that point. So there's no guarantee in paying. The question of if you pay, will they actually give me a decryption tool and will I get my files back? The unfortunate answer is yes, they normally will. There's been very few cases where they haven't actually done that. Many security companies would like you to believe that, but in reality, if you pay, you generally do get your files back. But, as I said, much better to be not in that position in the first place. And with the way ransomware is going, which we'll show you later, it doesn't necessarily mean you're even in a better place, even if you have got your files back. So let's actually look at how these attacks work. So, as I said, it starts with an exploit kit or a spam email. Once you've run that file or it's run on your machine, the first thing it does is connects to a command and control server, and it will normally do this over normal port 80, HTTP, sometimes HTTPS, so it's normal ports and stuff that you would allow through your firewalls, and it will make that connection, and one of the first things it will do is pull down the ransomware, if it hasn't already got it, or any other type of malware. Then it will send information about that machine back to the hackers, or the gang behind this. So they already have information about your machine and maybe the access it has. So they can choose, maybe, this account has got admin privileges, or maybe it's got domain admin privileges. Let's do some more damage here. So, the risk is straight away with this stuff. Now, once it's made that connection, it's pulled down the ransomware, the next thing it needs is the encryption key so that it can actually start doing the encryption and that you have no ability to decrypt. So that's the sort of next bit, that it starts encrypting the data. And we'll come on to what data it actually encrypts later, but you can assume you're going to lose everything you'd not want to lose. And we're not just talking about the stuff on your local machine. It used to be that ransomware would look for map drives and removable devices and encrypt those as well. Now it doesn't, most of them don't even do that anymore. They just scan for everything. Anything the account they're using, which is normally the local user account that's run the file, anything they have write access to, they will encrypt. So this includes your backup servers, if they have access. This includes network shares, file servers. Question we often see is, does this affect things like Dropbox and OneDrive and things like that? Well, if you've got that little tool on your machine that syncs your files with Dropbox or whatever automatically, then when those files become encrypted and they get backed up, then yes, you've lost those files as well. I should say that those services are getting better, though. I know the Microsoft one, probably many others, they offer a backup service themselves as well. So it's good, but don't just consider it a full-on backup service. Backups are only true backups if you take them offline. And then the next thing you'll see is the ransom demand. Now, this comes in several different methods, and we'll show some examples on the next slide. But you can basically expect on your desktop, as well as every folder that's had encrypted files in, you'll see a text file, maybe a HTML file, and a PNG image. And in some cases, you'll see, you'll hear an audio file, which will play you in a second. So they make it very clear. You have been compromised. You now need to pay. Many give you a time limit on how long you need to pay. Some start by encrypting some files and tell you in the next hour they're going to start encrypting more, and the fine's going to go up and up and up. So they work roughly the same, but there are differences. And then one key part is the ransomware deletes itself after it is run. So it gets onto your machine, it runs, does the damage, disappears. This is to make it harder for companies like us to try and get samples. It makes it more confusing for the end user because they think, is there something still lurking on my machine? When normally, no, it's gone. The damage has been done. They don't need to be there anymore. So why leave their evidence around? Okay. Now here's some examples of the ransom notes. If you Google ransomware note, you'll find many, many examples, lots of different ones. Some pretend to be, they're here to help. You've been encrypted. Luckily, we can save you, and all this kind of stuff. The similarities are fairly common, though. They will be asking you to use Tor or Tor browser and to pay via the online currency Bitcoin. Prices vary. On average, probably about $300 per machine. So it can vary. If you're a business and you've had a lot of different users running this stuff, and you've had a lot of different machines, the amounts can be a lot higher. Now, as I said, so you've got text files and HTML and stuff like that. In some cases, there's a ransomware called Cerber, C-E-R-B-E-R, and when you get that one, what you hear is this.
Attention. 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 Your documents, photos, databases, and other important files have been encrypted. Your documents, photos, databases, and other important files have been encrypted. Your documents, photos, databases, and other important files
so you get the
have been
idea.
encrypted.
Attention, your files have been encrypted. They make it very obvious. This is a business to them. They want you to know because they want you to pay. And they're making it even simpler for you. Over the years, it's gotten far more designed for the average user, for the home user. Home users are the best targets for this because they're the ones that normally don't have the backups and will have their family photos and stuff on their machines. Of course, they'll take money from businesses just as easily as well. So this is the payment page for the now defunct TeslaCrypt. So nice and clear, nice and simple. You pay 2.5 Bitcoins, which at the time was $550, and go and pay. They did offer a PayPal option, but it was $1,000 to pay. But it's all very clear to understand. You don't have to be an expert on Bitcoins or Tor or anything like that. And if you are confused, you can, first of all, you can upload a file, and they'll decrypt one file for free just to prove that they are able to do it. But then they also have their message center where you can send messages to them and they will talk to you. They will help you pay. There's a new ransomware, I forget the name actually, that came out recently, which actually has a live chat. So you can speak to these people in real time and they will help you pay. They know they're hidden and anonymous, so they just want the money. It's very business, very blatant. Okay. So let's take a look at some of the different ransomwares out there. So Locky is one that hit the press back in February, still around, still being updated, but there's actually more dangerous ones than that nowadays. But let's talk about Locky. So Bitcoin, 0.5 Bitcoin is about half Bitcoin. So at the time of me putting this together, 1 Bitcoin in pounds was £405. So we're talking a couple hundred quid, and that's per machine to get your files back. Started hitting headlines in early 2016, yeah. Now, 400,000 machines affected. That is a very out-of-date number now, I'm afraid. But, we are talking hundreds of thousands, millions of people were affected by Locky when it hit. So, this is a common thing that people have to deal with. One of the most publicized was the Hollywood Presbyterian Medical Center in Hollywood. In America. Now, they apparently paid up 40 Bitcoins, $17,000 to restore their lost files. Bearing in mind they could still be hit the next day. If they hadn't made any changes to their security, there was no guarantee they wouldn't be hit again. So this is serious what this stuff can do. Ambulances were diverted, medical records were lost, their email service went down, X-ray machines. They went down because the XML config files that allowed the X-ray machines to work, they were encrypted. So the X-rays couldn't work. This is very serious stuff. Their employees were banned from turning on their computers, and they were down for about a week. And this is a hospital, so the people doing this, they have no morals. They may have said sorry, the TeslaCrypt people, but they aren't, I'm afraid. So this is an example of one of the emails that a user might see. So it's a Word document, and it will normally have a bit of sort of gibberish text in there and a message saying, the encoding is incorrect. What you need to do is enable macros to sort it out. So you click on options, you enable macros, and of course it then starts running the macro, which connects to that CNC server and starts doing all the naughty stuff. So it's an important distinction, though, that the attachments on the emails aren't the ransomware, not normally anyway. They are what we class as downloaders. So they're malicious. We class them as malicious, but they're not doing the encrypting. So, if you're hit by these and you want them blocked, brilliant. We'll block them if they're not. But the ransomware is a separate thing. It's multi-faceted attack, these kind of things. You've got the spam email, you've got the attachments, and then you've got the ransomware. They're all interconnected, and they're all offered as different services that people can pay for on sort of monthly basis and stuff. So it's all very organized nowadays. And then we mentioned exploit kits. Now, interesting, this slide, which I only put in on Monday, is now out of date. I'll tell you why in a second. So Angler is one of the most well-known exploit kits around. Stats earlier this month showed that about 85% of exploit kits were Angler. And the way they work is, I mean, you can see some numbers there, but the way they work is you've got your user down at the bottom here. He's browsing the web, perfectly legitimate sites. He's not doing anything wrong. What he doesn't know is the website that he goes to on a regular basis has been compromised by an attacker. So there's been a little bit of code injected into it, a little bit of JavaScript maybe. And when they go to that website, they're silently redirected in the background. They won't have any idea anything's happening. They're redirected to, normally sort of, it's like a proxy server, it's to make it a bit more anonymous, but they'll go to another server, and then that will forward them on to the actual command and control server, the one that's hosting the exploit kit. And that exploit kit will basically run through a list of things. It will basically look for vulnerabilities on your machine that haven't been patched. So, it will check, are you using the latest version of Flash? Do you have this Flash vulnerability? Do you have this Java vulnerability? And it will go through this list until it finds one that you're not patched against, and then it will deploy its malware, depending on what rights that vulnerability gives it. So, that's why patching is so important, because, these are professionally made, well-funded tools that will just work through each one until they find an exploit they can use, and then you're in danger. So that's how the exploits work, and it's all silent. It's all what they call a drive-by download. The user doesn't need to have downloaded anything. They don't need to have accepted anything. All they need to have done is gone to the wrong site at the wrong time. Okay, yeah, so why are these attacks so successful? So, as I said, they're highly professional, well-organized. Unfortunately, they put a lot of the money back into their own organization, so they're very well funded. The emails are very well written. They're very well spoofed and stuff like that, so they look legitimate. They use clever social engineering to trick you into doing different things. And most importantly, they use the technology that you allow. They will use Microsoft Word and Excel because they know you allow those into your networks. They'll use JavaScript, so they know you allow that. They will connect on normal ports like port 80 and HTTP because they know you allow that. They know a lot of companies, unfortunately, have macros enabled by default without even prompting a user to enable it, and they take advantage of this. They also know that from a security point of view, blocking this stuff can be difficult. I mean, there's so much JavaScript out there, for example, that to block their little bits without bringing the rest of the world to a grinding halt, it takes a lot of work. So, they use all of these things to fight against us and you. So that is part of why they're so successful. Obviously, it is incredibly... they earn a lot of money out of it, in millions and millions, we're talking, billions, in fact. So, they unfortunately, until that's, people stop paying for it, they are going to attempt to continue. I should point out, so in reference to why Angler was now out of date, as of June 7th, no detections of Angler have been seen. It has disappeared. Nobody knows why. There are some arrests in Russia to some people that were potentially linked to it, so that's kind of the most common rumor at the moment, but there's no guarantees. We have seen exploit kits go quiet before because the owners have gone on holiday. They've earned enough, so they go on holiday and they shut them down while they're doing it, and then they come back and it's back to business. But at the moment, it's been over a week now, and Angler has disappeared. Unfortunately, it has been replaced by ones called Neutrino and Rig. Neutrino, interestingly, they used to charge $3,500 per month to use Neutrino. They've now doubled it to $7,000 because they're obviously, supply and demand, and they're trying to take advantage of Angler disappearing. But again, it is a business for them. Okay. These are the other things they take advantage of. People don't have backups quite often, or they'll have backups, but they leave them connected to their network. And if the wrong account gets compromised, then those backups get encrypted just as easy. Also, most ransomware deletes the volume shadow copies now, so you can't rely on that as a backup. And everyone knows the difficulty of patching. You know, it is a constant thing. As soon as a patch is released, they will start creating malware that takes advantage of it because they know people won't patch straight away. Dangerous user rights and permissions. You know, unfortunately, you should be working on a need-to-know basis. If someone in marketing has right access to the sales department's files, you should be asking yourself, do they really need that access? Because if they don't, they can't do any damage there. You know, lock those permissions down. Again, it's an admin overhead, but if for the people that have been hit, I'm sure they will agree that they wish they had done that a little bit more beforehand. Security training, you know, this is very constant. It's, you know, we're in an arms race. You know, we are fighting people that are very organized, very well funded, and keeping ahead of them is an ongoing thing. So getting the right people trained and considering security a priority is important. And another thing we see is, you know, you may not install all the layers of protection that you need. The example I heard the other day is, you know, if you're building a castle, you don't just build the walls. You build a moat, you build a drawbridge, you fill it with soldiers, you build catapults. You know, this is layers of protection. If you don't have those layers, you are vulnerable on that layer. So make sure you've got those layers. Make sure they're used correctly. Make sure you're following the vendor's best practices. And asking them for help. Make sure, you know, are you using this product correctly? Lack of IT security knowledge as a general, especially with users, you know, why did that user open that CV? Why did they think, I really want to pay this invoice, I'm going to open it straight away, even though I don't know who they are? You know, user training is the most important security layer you have, and unfortunately it's normally the least funded. And then, yes, the ever-going argument, security versus productivity or security versus performance. I'm going to turn this feature off because it slows YouTube down, that kind of stuff. Work with those vendors, you know, get those things turned on. If they cause problems, work with those vendors to understand how you can, you know, remove that performance hit. But fundamentally, whichever security product you use, they are the experts in this. If they are telling you that you need this, it is for a good reason. And without those layers of protection, it makes yourself more and more vulnerable. It's the honest truth, I'm afraid. Okay. So yeah, what's next for ransomware? So this is a really good time to do this presentation, I must admit, because there's a lot happened in the last month. Ransomworms, credential theft, and doxing. So Zcrypt, I think it was officially reported by Microsoft first. It's kind of they've been calling it the ransomworm. So in the past, ransomware doesn't spread. It does its damage, it disappears. It's not a virus. It doesn't spread. You know, it will infect other machines, but only in the sense that the user has access to those files, and it's that account that's encrypting them. It doesn't then go and spread onto other machines. But Zcrypt drops. So it's a normal bit of ransomware, but then additionally it drops autorun.Inf onto any removable device. So you get autorun.Inf on a USB, you plug it into another machine, it'll attempt to run that file, and that file is the malware. So that machine will then start encrypting files as well. Very simple, very easy to detect. It's sort of like version 1. They're testing other ways of making money, because apparently they're not making enough. The other one, which is potentially a bit more worrying, is Cryptex. Cryptex is the one that is basically being seen as the replacement of TeslaCrypt. So we see a lot of detections for it. And again, pretty much standard ransomware, does all the normal bad stuff, but then it has what they're calling a plugin. So it's a secondary payload that stays on your machine after the ransomware has deleted itself. And it will stay there and it will monitor for credentials. It will steal your email credentials, your browser data, your poker software credentials, and this list goes on. You know, and it will stay on your machine, stealing that data, so that the criminals can either sell that data on, or they can use it to come back and do another attack later on. So that's another worrying trend we're seeing at the moment. But again, we're talking version 1, kind of they're seeing what they can do and how well it works. But the more worrying thing from Cryptex is they're putting a lot of work into Cryptex. So we probably will see more along those lines later on. And then doxing, which is, I must admit, before I started doing the work on this, I hadn't heard that word before. Doxing is basically, they steal your data, and then they hold you to blackmail. So if you've got a bit of ransomware, it runs on your machine, you end up having to pay to get your files back. Then you find out that they've actually stolen your files as well. So they've stolen all your pictures. And let's just say, hypothetically, you've got pictures that you're a little bit embarrassed about. They're saying, if you don't pay this second demand, we're going to publish them on the internet. Now, there's not many examples of this yet, but the rumors are that is another thing they may try soon. So, it's just a worrying sort of trend that we're seeing at the moment that they're evolving. Now, I put this slide literally together on Monday, and it's out of date as well. There's another new ransomware called RAA, and I'm refusing to call that RA because that just sounds ridiculous. But RAA, it's entirely JavaScript. So there's no exe or anything like that. It comes on a spam email, generally, was what we've seen, and it's a bit of JavaScript. You run it. That JavaScript is the ransomware. It does the encrypting itself. It still has to connect to a command and control server to get the encryption keys, but it doesn't rely on an exe or anything else like that. Which is just, it removes a layer of detection that they have to get around, kind of thing. All of these, I should say, Sophos does have protection for, but they're a constantly evolving thing. And as I said, it's an arms race. Okay. Now, throughout all of this, I've talked about ransomware encrypting data. Now, I really want to highlight what that means. So looking at Cryptex 3.1, which is, I think, pretty much the latest version, here's some of the file extensions that it encrypts. Now, I bolded or highlighted the ones that I know if these files were lost from my machine, I'd be pretty annoyed. So you've got AVIs, you've got doc files, EMLs, you've got your CSV, CSS, HTML. So, if you're doing CAD drawings, you've got DWGs, DXF. So, those alone could really damage a business. And, of course, that's just the ones I've highlighted. And for any people that have spotted, this is alphabetical. So here's the next lot. There's your JPEGs, Java, MDFs and LDFs, which are databases, videos, PHP, so potentially your website gone, RAR files, and there's more. So SQL, Flash files, text files, WAV files, the XML files that I mentioned, zip files. And this is just what they do at the moment. They could increase this. And this is just one form of ransomware. The lists will change for each one. Some of them even, there was one back around the same time as Locky that encrypted your files and added the extension .lol to them. It actually only encrypted about the first 20% of the file, and it did this so it could speed up the encryption, so it could do a lot more damage a lot quicker, because 20% of the file encrypted, you've pretty much lost the file anyway. But so I don't think there's anyone listening to me right now that if they had a machine and lost all files of these types and didn't have backups, that could obviously cripple a business. So this is very serious stuff. Right, practical steps. So enough doom and gloom. Hopefully I've scared you all enough to make sure you understand this is serious and, we want to prevent this. So let's talk about how we do that. So these are the things sort of outside of Sophos, what you can do. I'm sure everyone has told you backup regularly. Keep those backups off-site and offline. This is the key bit that people forget. They leave them connected. They'll have maybe an external hard drive and they'll leave it connected. That's not a backup. That's just a copy of your files. It's not a backup. They need to be taken offline when you're not doing the backups. And, of course, restrict all the access to them. Macros. Now, even Microsoft admit automatic execution of macros in documents is a bad thing, which is why 7 years ago, whenever they made the change, you can, via GPO, very easily change the defaults so that if a macro is in a document, the user is prompted to choose if they want to run it. So at a very minimum, please go and do that now. And also ask yourself your question, does this user need to run macros? Because if they don't, just block it entirely. Interestingly, though, we're seeing the move away from the macro documents. They're still very common, but they are moving away and more towards JavaScript. Now, don't allow users to execute JavaScript. Now, we're not talking about JavaScript on web pages here. We're talking about someone double-clicking on a JS file, .js. Now, you would not expect users to normally need to execute JavaScript files, which are executable code. You don't normally want people to do that. There will be applications on your machines that require that to work. So, test everything before you roll it out. If you're using Sophos, there is a nice, easy way to do it. If you're not, or even if you are, make a GPO. Change your .js defaults to open in Notepad. Simple. It is not going to definitely stop everything, but if someone double-clicks on JS file by mistake and it opens in Notepad, no harm done. Very simple to do. Be cautious about unsolicited email attachments. Yes, I mean, this is user training. It's difficult, but, unless you're regularly telling people, they aren't going to learn, you need to make sure, if you don't know who these people are emailing you and they are sending you executable code in an attachment, then, go and seek advice before opening it at the very least. And as I said, login, do you need to be running as administrator? I know we all like to have admin privileges on our machine, but do we really need it? Do all your users really need it? Because if they do, that gives them a lot more power to do a lot more damage. And if, assuming most of you guys on here are either sort of network managers or IT managers, it's you that will have to do the cleanup. So, restricts those rules, rights. Microsoft Office Viewers is an interesting one. I must admit, most people don't like this one because the ones from Microsoft are a little bit outdated, a little bit old looking, but there's plenty of third-party ones. And, it basically, if you're in, let's say you're in Outlook and you open an email, instead of it opening up in, or the attachment, sorry, instead of it opening up in full Microsoft Word or Excel, it'll open up in a viewer. And those viewers don't support macros. So a very easy way to get around it. Patch early, patch often, highlighted for obvious reasons. I can't reinforce that more. I mean, back in the days of, for anyone that's been doing this for a while, you'll remember a virus known as Configure. I forgot the name for a second. Configure. Pretty much sort of 2011 time, if I remember correctly. It was everywhere, and it took advantage of unpatched XP machines. And Configure didn't even exist until the patch was created for it, because then they found out, there's a great vulnerability here we can take advantage of. And then we saw Configure for years afterwards, still do occasionally, and it's all because people aren't patching. And yes, as I said, configure your security products correctly. If you've got 100 different layers available to you and you're only using 50 of them, what do you think could happen? It's fairly obvious, really. So, security solution requirements, yeah. So, as a minimum, now, I can't imagine there's any of you here that don't have at least some sort of anti-malware, antivirus stuff on your machines. If you don't, then please do. Block spam. So, this is the interesting one. Blocking spam, the best place to do this is on your email gateway. So before it even gets onto your Exchange servers or onto your network, block it at the gateway. It's the easiest place to do it, and it's the hardest place for the criminals to get past. So if you don't have an email gateway solution, you should consider using that. Sandboxing obviously allows you to run these files in a sandbox environment before they get to users. It allows a lot better protection. As I've said to several people, no security company blocks everything at every layer. That isn't how the layers work. Each layer is created for a specific reason. If you haven't got all of those layers, then you are missing that element of the protection. Blocking risky file extensions, JavaScript stuff. So I'll talk about that when I get to the Sophos parts. But application, in fact, I'll talk about it now. So application control. If you've got our Enterprise Console product or our cloud product, which is renamed Sophos Central actually, you have application control. So this allows you to block different things. So you can block games, you can block file sharing things, you can block Tor. But you can also, under programming and scripting languages, you have the option to block, let's see if I can remember the wording here, I think it's Microsoft Windows WScript. That will stop users from opening .js files. And if you can't open it, it can't run. Do test before you roll out, because as I said, there could be Java applications on your machines that you need, but if there isn't, then I fully advise you to go and do that, because it is a great and simple way of stopping JavaScript. Password protect archive files. What we see is, especially for the JavaScript, they come in on a spam email, and it is contained in a zip. I won't go into the details, but it basically makes it harder to be scanned. I mean, most people don't scan inside archives by default anyway. But if you decided to block archive files, you can normally put in rules that say if the file is password protected, allow through kind of thing. Because the criminals, they don't password protect the files. It just makes it more likely that the user won't open them. So, it is and of course, from data leakage point of view and security, it is a good thing to do anyway. URL filtering, block access to these CNC servers. These attacks, they rely on connecting to external servers, either to download the malware themselves or to get those encryption keys. The first bits of ransomware didn't do that, and they had very simple encryption that we could reverse engineer. Now they do this so that we can't reverse engineer their encryption, but it does mean they have to make that connection. If they can't make that connection, the ransomware won't work. HTTPS filtering, make sure you're doing HTTPS scanning because they do use HTTPS. HIPS, host intrusion prevention, that's the part of sort of the advanced kind of antivirus kind of stuff that isn't, gone are the days where we're looking at a checksum and going, yeah, we've seen that file before because it's this checksum, this hash file, therefore blocked. We still do that because it's still the most efficient and fastest way of making a detection, or making a decision, I should say, because you don't have to scan the file. Has it got this hash? Yes, right. Block. But it's such a small percentage of what we do nowadays, and that's where HIPS comes in, and along with various other bits of technology. Activate your client firewalls. If you're on, especially Windows, I mean, all your machines will most likely have a firewall. Maybe a bit of admin work, but they are there for your security. Use them. And use a whitelisting solution. You lock down your servers. Make sure any of the things that you want to run can run. Okay. Additional steps. As I said, security, user education, sorry. If everyone was educated to the point where they fully understood malware, you'd have like 1% of the problems you have right now. I'm not going to pretend that's possible, but there are things you can be doing. So we have a IT security do's and don'ts. So it's PDFs, it's posters, it's videos, it's a lot of different things. You can print out those posters on huge A3 sheets, stick them around your office. We have them everywhere. We've even got them on the backs of the toilet doors. We see it everywhere we go. Sophos Threatosaurus, the name kind of implies it goes A to Z of all the sort of different threats and explains them in a very simple to understand kind of approach. They're given out to schools and stuff like that, so it's a very simple understanding. Segment your company network. Are your servers on the same network as your guest Wi-Fi or whatever? That's an extreme example, but if your users can't access your servers, then neither can the malware, generally speaking. NAC, so network access control, only allow machines on the network if they meet certain requirements. Do they have up-to-date antivirus? It doesn't have to be ours, just do they have up-to-date antivirus? Are they patched? Loads of rules you can set up along there. Encrypt company data. Now, this won't stop ransomware. A bit of encrypted data isn't going to, it doesn't stop it being encrypted again. So, but with what we're seeing with more theft of data, you can look at any of the stories in the press, Sony and Target and various other people. The list is endless. Encrypting your data just puts your company in a bit better place. And understand how you actually identify you're infected. Go back and don't just, here's the detection, but how does it get onto your network? So your endpoint is your last line of defense. If it's got to your endpoint, it's got through all your other layers as well. Okay. Now, I didn't realize how quickly time is going. So let's move on to how Sophos can help. So Sophos, we do what we call complete security. So we protect on your network, on your endpoint, everything in between, your servers, we do the encryption, mobile control, your Wi-Fi, your email, your web, everything. And then if you're using the Sophos Central product, it's all brought together in sort of one dashboard. So it makes it nice and easy for you to do. So all those different things like, web security, we're blocking those connections to the command and control servers. The endpoint, we're doing the HIPS and the host intrusion stuff, server, we're doing server lockdown to make sure, they can't alter the running of your servers and everything like that. Security, as a system, it must be comprehensive. It must be effective. It must all talk to each other. It must work with each other, and it must be simple. Leave the hard bits up to us, but from your point of view, we want it to be simple. If you don't know how to deploy this stuff, then we're not doing a good job. We've also invented a thing called Heartbeat. We're the first in the world to do this, and it's taking advantage of our network knowledge and our endpoint knowledge. So it's getting your endpoint to talk to your firewall, which is very unusual in the world up until now. They don't generally talk to each other. But an example of a machine gets compromised, it sends a message to your firewall. You have rules on your firewall that says, right, lock that machine down, get it off the network, disconnect it from the servers, take its internet access away. It all happens straight away. It's all locked down. Really limits the damage, and it really improves the knowledge of what's going on in your network. You can really make better decisions about your security. Now, we have a thing called malicious traffic detection. It's all on all our endpoints at the moment. And the way it works is a user has a file on their machine. So they've run one of these downloaders, and they've got the file. And that tries to make a connection to a malicious server. And what we do, malicious traffic detection basically looks at that connection and sees that it's going to a call home server, a command and control server. And we then say, well, let's take a little bit of a harder look at this. And we look at the process that's doing it. And if we then make the decision, whoops, too far. If we make the decision that it is a bad file, we kill that file, and therefore, the traffic has been stopped and the ransomware can't run. So that's available on endpoint and our Sophos central product at the moment. Now, Sophos Sandstorm, very, well, not new actually, relatively new. This is our sandboxing product. So you can integrate this into our email appliance, our web appliance, and our UTM. More coming later as well. And this basically, it's another layer. It puts anything that comes in on an email or downloaded to the web. It puts it into a sandbox environment. And if we already know that it's malicious, then we're not going to bother. We know it's malicious. We're going to block it straight away. But if we're a little bit suspicious about it, it will go into this, it will run it, and it will give you a report about the file. And of course, if we have determined that actually no, this is malicious, it will block it. And that, as I said, so that works with email and web and UTM and everything. So you don't need to go and sort of really change much. You can just add this in. It's a sort of an add-in to what you may already have if you're using those products. Now, CryptoGuard, this is the thing I'm very excited about. Not available to buy yet. I will stress that. Not available yet. We're talking Q3, Q4 this year, a few months basically. There is a beta available. Email the address at the end if you're interested. Basically what this does is, as you see, it's simple. It protects encryption of data. It was created to stop ransomware, basically. And what it does is monitors file system activity, and when files are being written to, so when they're about to be encrypted, we take a backup straight away of the file. And then when the file's closed, we compare what the file looks like now, what it was before, and if we decide, no, this is wrong, and if we see this happen like 3 times for the same process, then we'll say, no, kill that process, roll back to the original files, we've stopped the ransomware, we've restored your files, no harm done, basically. And of course, you know it's happened. All the samples go to us, and we can make sure protections are rolled out, so it doesn't even get to the point where it's encrypting those first 3 files. And the important bit down the bottom here stops local ransomware from attacking local data. Great. Stops local ransomware from attacking remote data. Good. That's stopped you, infecting your file servers and everything. And then it also stops remote ransomware. So if I'm a file server, it's stopping ransomware from encrypting my files, even though the ransomware isn't running on my machine. It's still doing it. So it's all aspects of what happens to these files. As I said, a few months away from that. It is coming out with some other very exciting stuff that I can't talk about yet, but look out for that, and it is going to make a very big dent on ransomware when it comes out. Now, I know I rushed through the end here, but many bits here I've talked about. You can go and read articles on this. So we have the Sophos white paper, How to Stay Protected from Ransomware. I'm a little bit biased because I wrote it, but I think it's great. It gives you lots of advice on what you can do, many of what we've just covered, but it also talks about individual products that we have and what settings you need to go and set for those. So I do advise anyone that's still worried about this, go and have a look at that. Naked Security, that's our blog. That's our security guys. Many blogs a day, many posts a day. They are where I get most of my information from, to be honest. So you can see all the articles down at the bottom there. They're all ones written by them, a few by me. And go and have a look at those. IT security do's and don'ts, as I mentioned. Threatosaurus. Now, Sophos Home, if you are new to Sophos or even if you've been with us for a while, we now have a home product entirely free. Works on PC and Mac, entirely free. It does your antivirus the same as what you'd expect from, or the same as what you get from your antivirus that you've got with our other products. It also does the web control, so you can block your kids from going to gambling sites and all that kind of stuff. Entirely free. I'm going to keep stressing that because we advertise it as, I'm not entirely sure if this is a real word, but we say it's unannoying. It has no pop-ups saying, you've been using this for a month. Would you like to pay for the better version? There is no better version. Well, there is, I suppose. There's Sophos Central. But basically, it won't remind you that you need to pay because there is no option to pay with Sophos Home. It is entirely free forever. I can't remember. I think it's like 10 devices you can install it on. But yeah, get it at your home. It's the same layer of protection as you'll have at work, and it's entirely free. Have I mentioned it's free? Yeah. Okay. Any questions? Go to customerteam@sophos.com. Plenty of people to help you there. Anything that they can't answer, I'm sure they'll pass over to me as well. And we are running out of time, so let's move to the questions.
So let's see, Peter, our first question is from Mark. He wants to know, is there a way to identify the encryption and stop encrypting before it has a chance to encrypt? Or is it too late once it starts?
So CryptoGuard, basically, is the answer to that. That is the product that will be detecting the encryption and stopping it, and, of course, making the backups. Just on a little side note to that, we did see... it may have been, no, it wasn't Locky. It was the one that does the LOL exclamation mark extension. They actually had some shortcut keys built into it. I forget which keys they were. It was like Alt-Z and Alt-R. Alt-Z would bring up debug information that showed how well the encryption was working, and Alt-R would actually stop the encryption. Because this is normal software. It's just malicious. So, they have the same kind of stuff that normal software writers put into them, but it's not something, if you get hit by ransomware, don't just start hitting all the keys on your keyboard hoping you'll stop it. That's not going to work. No, things like CryptoGuard, that is the answer to that question.
All right, great. Let's see. Next question. Looks like it's from Megan. Megan asks, if you had to pick one feature that makes Compellant a great product for any size company, what would it be? Sorry, I can't read today.
One component. That is difficult because it all depends on the context. If you're suffering from stuff that's coming in on USB sticks, then there's not much point me saying get an email gateway product. Of course, if you're getting hammered by spam, then device control to block USBs isn't going to do you any harm. I suppose the core part of most security is things like on-access scanning. Make sure that everything is being scanned live as it's being accessed. Don't just rely on a scheduled scan once a week. That isn't protection. And, well, it's kind of two things, I suppose, but make sure everything is up to date, using the latest versions, and following best practice, which I think I've said is three things, actually, but I'm afraid that's as much as I can narrow it down to.
Great. Here's another great question from Mark. He wants to know, if I encrypt the data, can it still be hit by ransomware?
Yes. Yep. As far as ransomware is concerned, it's just a file. I suppose, actually that's an interesting point because they look for the file extensions. So if the file is encrypted, it's not going to have the same extension. I wouldn't consider it a guaranteed method of protection. But yeah, no, it's an interesting point. Yeah, it may provide you a layer of protection, yes.
All right. Simon wants to know, if I have a client whose files are encrypted with Locky, is there a way to decrypt these files other than paying the fee?
Google, it is the answer. Generally, I would say no. We do have an article, actually, we haven't listed, on Naked Security. I think if you search, Ransomware, what are my options? I think that's it. So that talks about if you have been hit, what can you do about it? In some cases, like Tesla Crypt, the guys have got arrested or whatever, they've released the master decryption keys and now there are tools to decrypt it. There are some bits of ransomware that do have decryption tools because people have managed to do it because the encryption hasn't been that hard. Generally, the answer is no, and for the sort of weird, wacky ways you can do it, normally requires huge server farms or something like that. But the answer is no for 99%. However, in the example of Tesla Crypt shutting down and the encryption key being released, if you are refusing to pay, but the files are really important to you, put them on a spare hard drive, forget about them. Maybe in a couple of years, the guys will have got arrested and you'll be able to decrypt them then. But, unfortunately, the time to act on ransomware is before it hits, not after it.
Great. Next question. I've seen CryptoWare in action, unfortunately. If a user does not have access to a folder and inclusive document, will it still encrypt them?
Yeah, so ransomware, it works on the permissions of the account it's using. So if the user opens the file and runs some ransomware, it will be using that user's right. So if the user doesn't have right access to a file or a folder, then it's not going to be able to get into it. This is basic sort of Windows security and stuff. That's how it works. However, as always, there's a little catch. So, as I said, one of the things ransomware does in the first instance is sends its information about your machine and the access it has back up to the command and control server. So, if it finds out that your account actually has far more privileges than it should, then they might launch more attacks. There was another hospital in a different country, I'm not going to say which, but they had a bit of ransomware, and it spiraled out of control what they had because the account they were using had admin privileges, and that allowed them to do a dictionary attack, sort of a brute force attack on another account or on several accounts. And they found an account with domain admin privileges that had a 6-character, all lowercase, all letters password. Once they got past that, which was very easy to do, they had domain admin privileges, and they wreaked havoc. They destroyed their Exchange servers, they destroyed AD, they destroyed the backup servers. It was a real mess. And, so you don't just think that this is only ransomware. It could lead to more as well. That's the unfortunate answer.
All right, we have time for one more question. We've got a really good one here from Jason. He wants to know, are VHD or VHDX files being caught by anything? Should we run AV on hosted servers?
I don't know about those file types specifically. AV on hosted servers, virtual servers, everything like that, yes. We have products for that. If it's a machine that someone can make money out of, then there will be malware for it. We've seen ransomware on pretty much every system imaginable by now. We've got ransomware for Windows, Mac, Android, Linux, your PHP servers for your IIS and your web pages. So protection should be everywhere is my simple answer. And you'll be pleased to know that Sophos have products, everywhere.
All right, fantastic. Thank you so much for that awesome presentation. Do you have any final words for our audience?
Make sure you are following your security vendor's advice, be it us or someone else. If they're telling you to do something, it's for a good reason.